it was really the most enriching experience I've ever had in life, because I met so many kind, humble people on that trip that had absolutely nothing, but they'd open their homes, their huts to me. They'd share what little bit of food they had with me. And I mean, it was an amazing adventure. A lot of it was really harsh. Like, I pushed my bicycle for 25 kilometers all day through tracks in the Sahara, deep sandy tracks where it was too sandy to cycle, and the temperatures were up in the 40s, and I was dehydrating, and I was hot, and I was full of dust, and thinking, why am I doing this? But then when I got somewhere and I saw a beautiful thing, or I met these amazing people, it just made up for all those really harsh moments when I just realized I'm so glad that I had this dream and that I insisted on pursuing it. So yeah, absolutely life-enriching experience.
Welcome to Maré Sonora podcast. My name is Marina Guedes. I'm a Brazilian journalist who crewed on a sailboat in the South Pacific Islands for the last 4 years. Today, you'll hear the second and final part of my chat with Kirsten Neuschäfer. She is a South African sailor who will compete in the Golden Globe race next year. If you missed the first episode, make sure you check that out either before or after you listen to this one. Kirsten is a real inspiring person and has a great deal of memories to share. I had a look at about your bio as well. You've been doing a lot of solo deliveries, and that's okay for you. So that can be like an advantage for you on the race. You enjoy being on your own when you're sailing, right?
Yeah, I really do enjoy solo sailing. I enjoy any kind of solo adventure just because I feel that it challenges me a lot more, and that's the aspect I enjoy about it. And I don't get lonely when I'm doing something I really want to do. I could get lonely in a big city where there are hundreds of people around me and no one to talk to, but I don't. I feel solitude, which for me is positive. It's like you're somewhere where you can really absorb the silence and the nature and everything else, as opposed to loneliness. So I don't have a great problem with loneliness. And the other thing is, I sometimes feel more responsibility and more stress on my shoulder when I'm out on a boat as a skipper responsible for the boat and the crew, because whatever your decisions are, and the ultimate decision always weighs on your shoulder as the skipper. If you make a wrong decision, you're taking your crew down with you. Whereas if you're on your own, it's only yourself that you have the responsibility for. So yeah, it's definitely the fact that it's a solo race that is one of the biggest attractions to me about it. I probably wouldn't be doing it if it was a crewed race.
And also, I guess another good advantage for you is the fact that you're used to sailing in the higher latitudes, right? And this race goes below the 40s east, like you've been skipping in the sub-Antarctic, in the Antarctic Peninsula. Do you think that can help the background that you have skipping for pelagic will be another good thing for you?
Yeah, I definitely do think that's an advantage that I have Southern Ocean experience, because I feel comfortable down there. I know just how gnarly it can get down there, so I know the risks involved, but I feel like I've got a good understanding of the weather patterns down there and of the conditions that I can expect down there. And I really love sailing down there because you get these beautiful long period swells sometimes, and you know that you're riding out the weather system. So, I'm looking forward to that. The only thing is, I have experience in the Southern Ocean, the Southern Atlantic Ocean and the Southern Indian Ocean, but I've never been to the Southern Pacific Ocean. So I'm really looking forward to that. But that is the one sort of unknown stretch for me that's going to be really exciting too.
Cool, super cool. And speaking about your experience skipping boats to South Georgia, which is how we got in touch in the first place. I was brainstorming people and found your super cool trip with the guys from National Geographic. How was it for you to sail to such a blooming of wildlife place, and how do you like those regions?
It was one of the most amazing experiences. The first trip I ever did to to South Georgia from the Falkland Islands on pelagic. When we first saw South Georgia appear, it's like I could feel it in my heart, the joy at seeing such a sight, because it was, well, for one, it was the first time I saw a big iceberg at sea, which in itself was really exciting. In the fog, Wow. It appeared out of the fog. And then the next thing, we approached South Georgia, and it was so surreal. The beauty and the wildness and the ruggedness of it was just so surreal that I could hardly believe my eyes and my luck that I was actually there and seeing it through my own two eyes. I mean, it's one of the most breathtaking, spectacular places I've ever seen, because you see these rough, jagged mountain peaks all covered in glaciers and ice, and then you see this green tussock, and you see, you see penguin colonies of 300,000 king penguins, and the noise that you hear from it, and thousands of elephants and fur seals lying around. So in terms of wildlife and scenery and everything else, and just the sheer isolation and ruggedness and wildness of the place, it's really one of the most amazing sights.
Is pelagic fiberglass boat, or what kind of boat is she?
Pelagic is solid steel, really rugged steel. Yep. Which is really what you want when you're going to those kind of places, especially Antarctic Peninsula, because you're often motoring through brash ice and it's scraping against the hull. I mean, you're not steaming along at 20 or 15 knots like Titanic hitting an iceberg, you know what I mean? But you're motoring along slowly through the ice, and it is scraping along your hull. And being on a steel boat, that you can take a little bit more of a strike than you would on a fiberglass boat. So it's steel, or pelagic australis, of course, is aluminum, and they're both very solid hull materials for going into those kind of conditions.
And what about any story that happened to you that you could share with us today, either in the Southern Ocean or anywhere that you think of as a very special and I don't know, maybe frightening, something you want to share about your experiences before?
Sure. I mean, I have a whole lot. I mean, my first Indian Ocean crossing on a catamaran was a pretty amazing experience. The catamarans used to send them through Panama, so across the whole Atlantic and then the whole Pacific, to get to a place like Australia, for example, because they didn't want to send them into the Southern Indian Ocean for storm reasons and insurance reasons and everything else. But then one day the delivery company phoned and said, we need a catamaran to get really urgently to the Sydney boat show. There's no time to go through Panama and do the whole Pacific, and most of the guys don't want to do the Southern Indian on a catamaran. Would you be keen on doing it? And I'm like, yeah, I'm keen on doing it. This is the opportunity that I've waited for all this time. So, so we got the boat ready and off we went. And admittedly, the boat was well prepared, but we weren't prepared for the cold that we were going to encounter. I don't even, to be honest, it was summer and I thought we were going to stay a bit further north, and I didn't have a decent pair of sailing boots at the time, so I said, this is fine, I'm just going to go barefoot or in sandals or whatever the case may be. And the catamarans didn't have heating because they weren't built for high latitudes, they were built for the tropics. So basically we froze for the entirety of that trip. We were in this thick fog for pretty much most of that trip, but two very interesting things happened on that trip, and the one was we sailed into the St. Paul crater, which is this tiny little island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And it's amazing because you sail through this really narrow little crater entrance from the turbulence of the Southern Indian Ocean, and then you're in a crater, and it's like being in a lake. But it's a really gnarly place because you get katabatic winds flying down the crater walls the whole time and spinning the boat around, and the crater's really deep, so it's really difficult to anchor. And on top of it, we didn't have a dinghy or a tender or anything like that, but we really wanted to go ashore. So the only way to get ashore was to actually swim ashore, and the water was really cold. And there were all these fur seals in the water that stayed away from us while we were swimming to the shore. But once we got ashore, they were mock attacking us left, right, and center. And there was this tall tussock grass, and we walked to the top of the crater. And I just also then remembered thinking, this was a place I would otherwise never get to. And it's a once-off experience. I'm never going to experience this in my life again. But then on that same trip, we got into some really rough weather as well, where we were looking at, about 60 to 70 knots of winds and seas building. And there were times when the boat was surfing at 25 knots down waves, and we were thinking, this boat was not designed for this.
Wow.
This is getting really scary. So it was a lot of adrenaline. We were trailing warps behind us and, trying to keep the boat on course. But then what happened is we had a huge wave break over the back of the boat. And fortunately, at that point in time, we were all inside the boat, and the sliding door was closed. But it was like this big green wall of water that hit the sliding door and actually knocked the door out of its rails, and we instantly took on a few hundred liters of water, and the bilge pump alarms all went off, and we lost some of our fuel drums because it had snapped the webbing that they were tied up with, and it was a lot of adrenaline. But when we came out of it and we in the boat were fine, we were like, wow, feel the full force of the Southern Indian Ocean. So those
that must have been super, super intense.
It sure was, but it made for a good story. So.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I was thinking to ask about the other experience you mentioned before, like cycling, crossing Africa from bottom north to bottom tip south. How was it for you? Because you were cycling alone, right, on that land crossing.
Yeah, I did that trip when I was 22, and it was basically a dream of mine to do a trans-Africa trip overland, because I'm from South Africa and I love Africa. I love the people, I love the scenery, and I had this deep desire to see the rest of the continent. And at the time, the only mode of transport I could afford was a bicycle. And I also felt that in terms of fixing a bicycle, it's a lot simpler than trying to fix a Land Rover when you don't potentially have enough mechanical knowledge. So I bought myself a bicycle in Europe, and I started pedaling. And initially, everyone said, they laughed at me. They said, this little 22-year-old girl thinks she's going to cycle right across Africa. And I had all these doom and gloom prophecies. People were telling me, you're going to turn around before you even get to the next country after Morocco, or you're going to die of thirst in the Sahara, or you're going to die of some disease, or you're going to get killed, or whatever the case may be. So by the time I started my trip, I was full of fear. Like, everyone had told me these horrible things, and I kept on reminding myself, none of those people have done it. So based on what are they telling me, what's all going to happen to me? And it was really the most enriching experience I've ever had in life, because I met so many kind, humble people on that trip that had absolutely nothing, but they'd open their homes, their huts to me. They'd share what little bit of food they had with me. And I mean, it was an amazing adventure. A lot of it was really harsh. Like, I'd push my bicycle for 25 kilometers all day through tracks in the Sahara, deep sandy tracks where it was too sandy to cycle, and the temperatures were up in the 40s, and I was dehydrating, and I was hot, and I was full of dust, and thinking, why am I doing this? But then when I got somewhere and I saw a beautiful thing, or I met these amazing people, it just made up for all those really harsh moments when I just realized I'm so glad that I had this dream and that I insisted on pursuing it. So yeah, absolutely life-enriching experience.
That sounds fantastic. Do you ever think about writing about it, publishing anything sometime, or even about the race when you finish the Golden Globe race?
I do sometimes. And for example, on that Africa trip, I did actually keep a diary, and I used to often in my life keep a diary, and somewhere I got too busy, or I stopped doing it, and I'd like to start it again, because I think it's a healthy thing to do. For one, because you record those things that in later years you might forget, and secondly, it's a good way to sort your thoughts, and just keep in touch with yourself and with what's happening, and especially when you're in a very privileged situation to be doing something like that. I think it is worth recording, and I can foresee myself in later years sharing those experiences, because I need to say to myself, I've been privileged and lucky enough to do these things. So if there are other people out there that are interested in reading about it, then it's kind of my duty to be willing to share it with people, and I would do so gladly.
Awesome. Really, really looking forward to that. That sounds really incredible material, really, really inspiring. And before the trip, so the trip starts September next year, the race, 4th of September, if I'm not wrong.
Yep,
so you're going to have to do a Atlantic crossing before. You're going to have to go to France. To the starting line is in France. So you have ahead one more Atlantic crossing before the race itself, right?
Yeah, and I'm very glad that I at least have one ocean crossing, because if I had more time, I would maybe have sailed all the way to South Africa and then sailed from South Africa all the way up to Europe, because it would be a trickier route and you'd have a bit of Southern Ocean in it and all sorts of things. But unfortunately, I just don't think I'll have the time. So I'm glad for that one Atlantic crossing. And as it is, every competitor in the race needs to do, I think it's a 2,000 nautical mile qualifier on their own boat, and showing that they did it with celestial navigation. So they could have a GPS on board, but they need to show all the sites and show that they also did it with celestial navigation, because of course the race organizers want people to be prepared before they start on the race. So it's things I anyway have to do, and it's something I'm really, really looking forward to.
That's great. And Kirsten, the last thing I would like to ask you is to invite you to give a word to the people out there, to invite people to be your supporter or sponsor or whatever, because I hear you have a campaign going on so people can actually help you out. Could you please tell us how can people get in touch with, and what can they do to support you?
Oh, thank you, Marina. Yeah. I am running my campaign, and I have received a lot of private support, financial private support from people that have just wanted to help. And there's a GoFundMe site, and there's also on the website, there's also a donation link to donate via PayPal. And that's really been helping hugely, because if it hadn't been for all those people, whether it's been small contributions or big contributions, it's been what's keeping the project going. And there've also been people who've been willing to contribute skills or equipment. There's a lot of equipment that I need, so any such contributions really, really help. And then of course I'm also hoping that maybe we'll be able to find bigger corporate sponsorship, where if it was a corporate sponsorship, people would get branding rights, or there'd be marketing value in it for them, basically. So yeah, so all that information is how to contact me, my email address, the donation links is all on my website, which is kirstenneuschafer.com. But then, there's another form of support, and that is people just following. So people who want to be part of the journey and follow my progress on Facebook and on Instagram. The more people I know are out there following and rooting for me, the more encouraging it is for me to keep going. So every and all little bit of, support helps.
A few months ago, I saw you created like hoodies and T-shirts with the logo. Is it available for people to buy as a way to support you still? Can they do it through the website?
Yes, they can. That merchandise certainly is still available, and it's kind of always available. It redirects you to a bonfire.com site, and you can do the purchase on that site. However, we have to update, we have to keep on making those things live again, because sometimes it doesn't automatically happen. So if anyone ever does try and buy some merchandise and it's not working for whatever reason, if they drop me or my team an email, we can make sure that we can make that thing live again, and that people can buy that merchandise as well.
Great. I'll make sure I put all the links that you mentioned just a few minutes ago on the description of this episode, so people can have a look there and directly visit your Instagram, your Facebook, your website, and have access to your newsletter, the monthly newsletter that you guys have. So get updates on your steps. So I'll put them all on the description of these episodes.
Thanks, Marina. Thank you. That's really cool, and this is really great that you're doing this.
That's nothing I can do. That's a minimal help, and I thank you for taking some time on a Saturday to talk to me on your day that you're supposed to be having some time off, relaxing from the busy week. So I do appreciate that. And it was awesome to meet you and to hear your story. And I wish you all the best and keep in touch.
Thank you, Marina. Likewise, awesome to meet you. It really has been my pleasure. And let's keep in touch for sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed, please feel free to share with anybody who you think might like it as well. Don't forget to hit follow so you get notified when the next one comes out. Make sure you have a look at the description of this episode, where you can find all the links to help Kirsten out. Any kind of support is super welcome on her journey towards the Golden Globe race. You can also watch this series on YouTube. The link for that is also on the description of this podcast. I'll be back next week. Until then, stay healthy and safe wherever you are. Cheers!